And here we go. We are into the second preview out of three that I'll do today for the season. And we're up to the New Jersey Devils, a team that did the franchise history for not too long ago. The franchise histories as well. Those will get finished. I still have 14 more to go. Vegas might be kind of quick. But I still have technically 14 more to go. And those will definitely get done over the next few weeks. I want to get the previews done first, and then we'll go into all of the rest of the playlist stuff that I've been doing and get some videos going in there. And of course, in between, hopefully we get some restricted free agents getting signed. Now, New Jersey. New Jersey's a team that, much like with Nashville, who I just did the video on, there's going to be some debate. Some debate about how good New Jersey could be. And for me, and I know, I'm going to suffer my slings and arrows for this one, it is going to come down to goaltending. Because when you look at this team, they had 72 points last year, 97 the year before that. So you can look at just those last 2 years and say, okay, so which was the real team? The one that had 97 points and got into the playoffs, or the one that had 72 and just flamed out? The biggest difference you can look at is Taylor Hall is healthy for the season that they have the 97 points, and he's not for the season they had 72. Now, the season prior to the 97-point season, they had 70. The season prior, they had 84. The season before that, they had 78. So, in the last 5 years, they've made the playoffs once. Which means for people who say, hey, the Devils aren't really a playoff team, they can point to that and say that's why they're saying it. 222 goals scored last year, was 26th overall in the National Hockey League. 275 goals allowed, also 26th in the National Hockey League last year. So they have to improve both. And that's where it gets tricky. And you can point out, hey, Cory Schneider played well after the trade deadline. Which he did. But he has to put it together over a full season and show that at 33 years of age he can bounce back and stay healthy. And that's been tricky for him. This is a team that started out of the gate really, really well. They were 4-0. And it looked like these guys were going to be not only a playoff team, but we might be talking about contenders. And then it started to fall apart. By the end of October, they were 5-3-1. By the end of November, they were 9-11-4. And they never really recovered from that. End of December, they're 15-16-7. End of January, 19-24-7. End of February, 25-31-8. End of March, 29-40-10. And in April, at the end of the season, they were 31-40-10. So they slowly dropped after that 4-game winning streak at the start. So that's where, if you want to poke holes in the Taylor Hall theory, you kind of can. Because their record wasn't fantastic when he got hurt. It wasn't a great record. Did it get worse after he was out? Sure. But were they going to make the playoffs with him? That's debatable. Because again, they weren't getting saves from Kincaid when they needed them. Schneider couldn't get a win to save his life. And then Mackenzie Blackwood came up later in the season. And his performance was uneven, but that's to be expected from a young goaltender. His overall stats weren't bad. Now, all of that considered, the MVP on this team, I see it as Taylor Hall. I think if they're going to come back and they're going to make the playoffs, I think it's easy to point to Hughes. It's easy to point to Subban. But for me, it's Taylor Hall. He is going to be the guy that drives this. And not just with performance on the ice either. It's going to be, he has to show he's buying into the Devils off the ice as well. So if he's wishy-washy and he kind of has an attitude with the press of, I'm not going to stay here, it could be detrimental to the team. So Hall has to come in with the right mentality. And really, honestly, it's going to be a tough year for New Jersey and Ray Shero. If Taylor Hall makes up his mind early, this team isn't the place he wants to stay. So if they get off to a slow start, if they end up below 500 20 games into the season, and Taylor Hall starts thinking of where he wants to play next year, and New Jersey's not on the list, it could make for a long season. And so that's why we're going to hear a lot about Taylor Hall for the next year. Until July 1st, when either he's signed or he goes somewhere else, something happens, we're going to hear a lot about Taylor Hall. As stated, one playoff in the last 5 years. The only notable that I could find that's not going to be in their lineup this year, who finished the season with them last year, is Steven Santini, and that's a very minor. He played 39 games, so it's not like it's an everyday defenseman they lost, and they're going to tell you that they traded up when they got rid of Santini. Goals, I expect Kyle Palmieri to to kind of lead this team in goals. Kyle Palmieri had a very good start to the season, was having an excellent season overall, and it wasn't being talked about. His performance dropped a little bit in around an injury time, but he had a very good season. And again, this is all going to be dependent on health with him, but if he can have a good, healthy season, Palmieri should be their goals leader. Jack Hughes doesn't project to be a huge goal scorer. Nico Hischier isn't a huge goal scorer. And Taylor Hall, for all the points and for all the flash and dash, he usually leaves you wanting more when it comes to goals. He is much happier to dish the puck off. Dark horse, I went with Jesper Bratt. Jesper Bratt's kind of going to get forgotten on this roster with all the new shiny toys this team has. And his points per game wasn't bad last year for a team that was having trouble scoring. And with better line mates, Bratt could score. He could end up in the 45-50 point range. In what about, I have Blake Coleman. Why Blake Coleman? He had 22 goals last year. Same reason as Bratt. With all the shiny new toys on the team, he kind of gets pushed down. But if he can put up 20 goals last year on a team that can't score, I think he can put up 20 this year as well. And if you can get some scoring from that third line, that's something New Jersey hasn't had in a long while. Trade bait, I went with Pavel Zacha. He had 13 goals last year. There are signs of progression, but with the addition of Hughes, and you got Hischier down the middle, if Zacha projects as being a center, as a full-timer in the National Hockey League, if you're not going to try transitioning him to the wing, and even then, what wing do you transition him to and who do you demote for him? Zacha's kind of spinning his wheels and shouldn't be on the fourth line. So I would think he might get moved. Now the obvious to me would be Zacha to the Oilers and Puljujarvi making his way to the Devils. The problem being, who would Puljujarvi replace in this lineup either? So that was just a thought I had, because Zacha, if added to the Oilers, would be a center, and you might be able to transition Zacha into a more offensive role in Edmonton, and maybe you drop Ryan Nugent-Hopkins down to third, or maybe he plays third line. And anyways, that was just an idea I had. And again, the problem is Puljujarvi, I don't see where he would fit in, and he doesn't seem like the kind of guy Ray Shero would go out and get necessarily. That being said, he did pick up PK Subban, a guy who people say makes it all about him, and it's not about the team, it's about him. I don't really care if you're a really good player, and I mean that. Sometimes the players who are known as being cocky or self-centered, well, yeah, but as long as when they're on the ice they play well, and as long as it's justified, I don't think it's a big deal. I don't think it's a huge detriment. So I get why players like that get moved, but I also get why other GMs say, yeah, no, we'll take him, because he's supremely talented. Now, getting to their roster, and the difference between where they were a few years ago and now is startling. So even though they only had 72 points, if you compare this roster with any of the other rosters they started the season with, even that 97-point season, I think this roster's potentially a lot better. You'd have Hall, I guess Hischier, unless Hughes pushes him out of that number one center spot, and Palmieri on the first line. And then on the second line, you have the extreme wild card of Nikita Gusev. If Gusev ends up being a really good player at the National Hockey League level, New Jersey gambled with Vegas and won, which is a very, very rare thing. And then you'd have Gusev with Hughes and likely Simmons. That being said, I could see Simmons on the third line and Bratt on the second. And then you got Coleman, Zajac, and the aforementioned Bratt, which means that that's a pretty solid third line right there. You'd have three players who can score points. And then a fourth line of Wood, Zacha, and Boqvist, and I don't like Zacha on that fourth line. I would much prefer to see John Hayden centering that fourth line with Boqvist and Wood, or even Joey Anderson on that right wing and Boqvist. Again, they've got a lot of players. Brett Seney isn't even in this lineup right now. Joey Anderson either, and Hayden would be an extra. And then, of course, you have Michael Mcleod, a first-round draft pick that at this point looks like he's going to be a bust. But he's still out there. Kevin Rooney, who played about half the season. Ben Street, who came over from Anaheim. He proved last year that he could be a good fill-in. Provides some solid depth for you. And Nathan Bastian, who garnered some headlines this past season. And we'll see whether or not he justifies a role in that top four lines. There's a lot of depth in this forward group. Somehow, some way, Ray Shero has built a team with some really solid depth. And again, if Gusev and Hughes are both able to play. So if Hughes comes in and he's physically ready to be an NHLer and he can produce right out of the gate, and if Gusev's as good as advertised, this is a team that could easily be top 10 in the league in goals scored. So are they going to prevent him at the other end? Yeah, they should be able to. You got Sami Vatanen, PK Subban, Will Butcher, and Damon Severson as your top 4. Well, boys and girls, if you rewind my previews by about 3 years, I said basically that Andy Green being a top pairing defenseman was a problem. I couldn't see the Devils being a contender while Andy Green was in those top 2, not as a slam to Andy Green, but because he was not a defenseman that you would put out there as a top 2 against almost any other in the league. Now Green's number 5, Connor Carrick's likely number 6, with Mirko Mueller sitting at 7, Matt Tennyson at 8, and hey, what if Ty Smith comes into training camp and he's really lights out and he earns himself a spot on that blue line? This is now a deep, talented blue line that can score and that has some solid defensive acumen as well. So adding PK Subban may very well be that magic elixir to make New Jersey not only a playoff team but a contender. The trick is, it's the Metro. And the Metro, everybody's jumbled together. So, with all of that praise out there, okay, for how great this blue line and how great how great the center spot and everything else is on this team forward-wise, Cory Schneider. Is Cory Schneider still a legitimate starting goaltender in the National Hockey League? There are those, mostly Devil fans, I think, at this point, who will say yes. I'm on the fence as a person who's a huge fan of Cory Schneider because I would need to see it over a full season, and he needs to show he can stay healthy. It's one after another with him, and it's at age 33, it can be really difficult to get out of that pattern. Mackenzie Blackwood looked pretty good. Would I say he's projecting to be an excellent starter in the National Hockey League? Jury's still out on that. And I that's where my concern is with them. And then at number 3, I went with Evan Cormier as the number 3. In net, they've been drafting goalies every year. One thing I'll say for New Jersey, every year they draft another goalie or 2. And so eventually, just by sheer numbers, you're going to see a goaltender come up who's going to be a pretty darn good netminder. The Schneider starting role makes me nervous. This is a team that could finish last in the division. This is a team that could finish much, much higher. I'm not envying the task I'm going to have when I'm finished all these previews, and I actually sit down and force myself to make a prediction of where everybody's going to finish, because New Jersey is really, really tough to pick, because you have to look at other teams in the division, whether it's Columbus or whoever, and say where they're going to finish. Now, I don't think New Jersey finishes lower than 6th. I don't see how. That being said, I'm not sure that I can see them finishing ahead of the Capitals. I still like what the Islanders have going, even though you could point to the Islanders and say, well, there's some concerns in one area or another, but for instance, going from Leonard to Varlamov, there's some risk to that. So I'll say 3rd to 6th. This could very well be a playoff team, but again, and I hate to harp on it, but this is where I get concerned. Everything else is pretty okay. If there is another area of potential concern, it would be if Gusev flops at the NHL level and if Jack Hughes just isn't quite ready. The thing is, Blake Coleman is a 20-goal scorer who can jump into that spot, and Travis Zajac is capable of playing second-line center if he needs to, and then that could potentially move Zaka up in the lineup and allow Hayden to play some more. There are some safeguards in place for if things don't quite work out. But let me know what you guys think in the comment section below, as always. I know it's going to be the New Jersey Devils versus everybody, because that's the whole tagline, and I think it works. And we'll see what happens. Last year, they were against the the injured list, and the LTIR won very often. We'll see how it goes for them this year. But let me know your thoughts. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through. You just happen upon this video. And hey, again, the Metro is really, really wide open. And the next two teams alphabetically for me to go through are in the Metro. So we'll see how that goes. Thank you guys so much for watching. I'll talk to you again soon.